and then after this session you can ask. Okay, thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
All right, and today's last, but definitely not the least, speaker is a mathematician from Colorado, one of my favorite places in the world. But he lives in and works in London. Okay, Scott is the director of data science at NBC Universal International, and then leading a team in data analytics and then mining projects across film, TV, and then home entertainment. I'm very much thrilled to have his inspiring talk titled "A Million Ways to Die in Big Data." Please welcome Matthew Eric Bassett.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Are any of you tired? Anyone? Tired. I am very tired. I have been traveling nonstop this month. I can't remember where I was last week. I can't tell you where I'm going to be next week. And I'm so jet-lagged, I don't even know what's on my slides. Nevertheless, I am really excited to be here this afternoon on the last talk of today, because I have the most exciting and the coolest job in the world. In fact, if you read the Harvard Business Review, they say I have the sexiest job in the world, but I leave the more provocative adjectives to the people at Harvard. I'm the director of data science at NBC Universal, and this is a really good time to be involved in anything with data. And you might have heard the quote, I can't remember from who, that software is eating the world these days, and it's really true. We don't make cars anymore. We're actually making computers that control internal combustion engines. We don't make airplanes anymore. We make computers that control jet engines. I'm lucky enough that I still have a toaster that's connected to the internet, but that's not connected to the internet. But with all this talk of the Internet of Things, I don't know how much longer that will last. And all of this software is running on big data. And it's really exciting, especially if you're looking at something like the Obama campaign in 2008 and 2012, when all their analytics software to see which voters they should be knocking on the doors in their neighborhoods, who might be able to flip to vote for a Democrat this election year. All these applications they were using, everything they're doing was driven by data. And as we saw with our two earlier speakers, you can't create an internet store, or you can't even make a television series without talking to big data. Now, what I want to talk about with you all this afternoon for the next 30 minutes is how I got into the film industry doing data science here, and what sort of problems we have, and how we came to those solutions. But I'm going to skip to the end and just tell you what the solutions are. Big data is all about empowering people. Whenever you're trying to do a big data strategy, it's not so much about using the data to write the content. It's about using the data to give the writers the best information possible to write their content. It's not using the data to drive your political campaign. It's using data to give all of your political analysts and your commentators the best information they can to make their decisions. Now, a bit about me, because this is a talk all about me, because I like to talk about myself. And I'm going to tell you about how I got into the film industry and the problems that I've seen about in it, and how they were dealing with those problems before, and how we've used big data to change those. I'm going to talk about the problems we had with my initial attempts and what the new solutions are. And I'll start with talking about myself and who I am. As the moderator said at the beginning, I'm a mathematician. I studied in Colorado and then studied in London. 5 years ago, I was writing my thesis on the quantum statistical mechanics and non-commutative geometry of Galois theory. And good luck on the translators figuring that one out. I've kind of stumbled into the film industry by accident. I was a poor, starving, broke student and was working on another startup in my spare time that went nowhere. And I got an email from someone at Universal Pictures who noticed I was in London and asked me for help on one of their international projects. And I was like, yes, I'll take your money. I mean, I'll help you with your project. And I came down and I started to see what's going on. Now, I don't think I need to tell you too much about NBC Universal. We're a massive American media company. We do everything from CNBC financial news to zombievers on the Sci-Fi Channel. I don't know if any of you saw Sharknado. Was that big here? Anyway. Perhaps the most well-known part of NBC Universal is Universal Pictures, a company that hired me 4 years ago. And the data science division that I lead mostly works with theatrical and Universal Pictures. Now, when you think about big data these days, you're probably thinking about something like Netflix, where they're tracking what you're watching and what purchases you're making, and recommending the best movies to you, or even producing television shows based on what you like. Or you might be thinking of set-top boxes on your cable or satellite things, where they're watching how often you're changing the channel on your TV and how far along you are into the show before you switch. You probably aren't thinking about the cinema down your street when they're showing the latest blockbuster. But I'm here to tell you that this is exactly a big data business. I wasn't joking when I said I don't remember what's on my slides. Now, when I got into this business, the first thing I needed to do is figure out what the international film industry is like. And I work on the distribution side. It means on one side you have people making television and movies, one side you have people marketing them, and on another side, the side I'm in, you have people trying to figure out where the audience is that wants to see these films and how we're going to get them to it. The way this works, in kind of a brief narrative, we'll have a big film executive, and he might walk into a film festival, or he might commission a film, and he'll say, this film is pretty good. And he'll call up the head office in London and say, I just saw this great film at Sundance Film Festival. I want to acquire the rights for it. And we get the word from the exec, the big boss, that we just got a new film to distribute. We then start looking at all our local offices to see what they can do with it, and tell them they need to start preparing marketing strategies for this new film. They have to start calling local exhibitors, the actual cinema owners. They get on the phone and negotiate with them and say, we want to book this film in your cinema on such and such day. Now, the thing about the film industry is, of course, all of our films end up on Netflix, or some of them end up on Netflix, they end up on DVD, they go all over. But in the cinema is the very first place you see them. We act as kind of an underwriter for the entire product, because all additional products are based off of what they do in the box office. When we're negotiating with Amazon or iTunes, when we're negotiating with a television channel, when it's going to DVD, even when you watch a film on an airplane, all of those contracts are based on how well it's doing on the local box office however many months ago. So this is a really important window, regardless of how much money it makes, because it tells everyone how much a film is worth. This is the first time an audience gets a wide exposure to our films. As it turns out, the lifetime gross of a box office is entirely determined by, not entirely, but almost completely determined by how much it makes in the weekend box office. This drives a lifetime, which then drives all other contracts. So as you expect, if we're an international film distribution company, we want to make sure that our weekend box office on every film we do is the biggest and best we can get. That means the largest audience available to see our films and who wants to see it is going to get it. The biggest factor in determining your weekend box office is your competition. What other films are out there that people want to see? Now, if you're running a film industry a distribution company in the United States, this is a pretty easy job because you know the entire market. It's one large country, everyone speaks the same language, everyone uses the same currency. You pretty much know when to distribute your films. But internationally, things are a bit different. Almost every country has their own local film industry producing stuff. In fact, when you're trying to figure out when to place your movie, you want to see what all the other competition is. So one thing you need to do is track every time a new release comes on the market or somebody changes a film in a different market. It turns out there's 50,000 release date changes a year on average. This was the number for 2013. That's 1,000 changes a week. Now, if you want to figure out the financial value of every one of these changes, which you're going to need to do if you're distributing 200 films a year, 200 films in 50 different countries, then you're going to need to run in a pretty intensive analysis 1,000 times a week. Very quickly, if you're doing just a basic Excel spreadsheet analyst job, doing this 1,000 times goes from Excel level work to big data work. And before we started a data science team, this wasn't even possible. We would just guess. The other problem is if we want to pick the best release date, before we had a big data strategies, there was no quantitative way to pick the best date. Everything we're doing was essentially guesswork. We would release a film in Turkey and say, that looks like a good date to release a film in Turkey. I don't know about that local film coming up. You know, people like to go see films in Italy in August. Yeah, it's a good idea. And we never have any data to back this up or warn us against this. These were the problems I discovered in the industry when I got onto it. Not I discovered, everyone knew about these problems beforehand. I'm not some sort of genius who found these. But what was interesting was how the industry was dealing with this 5 years ago. And I thought the way of dealing with it looked a little bit like this. We had a bunch of data silos. You'll have each of teams in the company is keeping all these data inside their own large container, holding it to themselves and not letting it see the outside light. We'll have the finance teams who know the international sales data going back 20 years. And when head office asks them to tell them what their film's going to do in 6 months, what the market's going to do in 6 months, they're using that data. But they're not looking at social media. They're not asking local territories what's going on in their markets. All they're doing is looking at their own data and their happy silo. Again, you'll have social media. And when the head of marketing wants to ask the digital media and social media campaigns, how are our films looking? You got a bunch of data bunnies running around in their little data silo, bumping around with their own data, trying to come up with an answer. But they're missing out on the local territories. They're missing out on the finance data because everyone has their own little projects in these own box, and they're doing things one step at a time in a very ad hoc process. And they're getting very, very nervous every time one of the big bosses comes out and says he wants some information about when to release a film. So no one's seeing the whole picture. And when finance is trying to guess what a film's going to do or what the market's going to look like in 6 months, they're completely unaware of what's going on in social media. They don't know about talent campaigns. They don't know about how the marketing spend is doing. They don't even know about publicity. And the same thing is going on everywhere else. Social media might be seeing this great talent campaign going on in Brazil, where the cast of a film is touring the country to promote the new film. People might be going mad on Twitter. Social media doesn't know that this is important to that local market. So one of the problems we have if we wanted to start a big data campaign here is obviously we have the big data. We have 50,000 release date changes. We have all the information and the analysts to go on to figure out which date is going to affect the bottom market. But we also have all this messy data coming in from social media, coming in from people's comments on YouTube, from people's comments on IMDb. We have incomplete data coming in from local cinema chains who are not telling us the complete story about who's coming into their cinema on which day. But we also have this siloed data that the finance team isn't even telling the social media team what's going on. The social media team and the local territories aren't communicating well enough to be able to capture these big important changes. So when I got here, and my naivety and my overconfidence, I thought I had a solution. I was going to use my big data magic to make some prediction reports for the box office market going 6 to 9 months in advance. This information would capture a subset of what's going on in social media. It would capture some of what's going on in finance and in the historical sales trends. It captures some of what's going on in the local territories, and it would jumble this all up and produce an automated report. And I was very proud of it. I used a mathematical method called a Monte Carlo simulation, and I was able to do some machine learning magic with it on all of our historical data, both for social media and for our historical sales data. And this simulation was taking into account social media. It took into account the local territories insight. It looked at the demographics of who was interested in a certain film. It can build a profile of a film, say Battleships, and see who in what country is interested in this film. And then it would go back and build another demographic profile and say who in Korea is available to go to the cinema on its opening day. It would use the financial data to look at historical performance on given weekends with respect to the weather. It would also look at all publicly released film schedules, and not just film schedules. We would look at this simulation would gather school holidays. It would gather video game releases. It would gather sporting releases, which are very important in Eastern Europe. And it was great. It worked. Yes, it worked. That's my next slide. I was very happy. My team was very happy. But there's a problem going on is that nobody was actually using it. It really sucked. And this was very frustrating to me and my team, because after we had it, and to make sure that something's working in the film industry, you need to see it for a couple of releases. Because if it works once, you might just be getting lucky. But we were seeing it for a good 6 to 9 months, being completely ignored in some back office in London, where we'd see that it's predicting in 3 months, we have a major release, it's on the wrong date, it's going to go bad. We tell people, nobody listens. We continue this process, another film comes up, it says this film's going to do much better than expected, nobody listens. This goes on, and we're scratching our heads and kicking ourselves in the butt trying to figure out how come nobody is listening to us. And it came down to what we think are 3 issues. Nobody really trusted the predictions, regardless of how often it was succeeding. Nobody understood how the prediction worked. When the finance teams would come out and give you their results, you knew not only how they got to it, but you also knew who gave you that report. So if their prediction is wrong, you know who to blame. This goes back to the trust issue. When a machine is giving you some prediction, you just say it's a stupid computer and go on with your life. You can't hold the computer accountable. And you don't necessarily understand what the computer is doing when it gives you this prediction. If I tell you I'm using a machine learning Monte Carlo simulation, you don't necessarily know what that means, and we can't go back through our gigabytes of data and explain which factors influenced the algorithm's decision. The third problem is that we didn't make it easy for people to use it. What we added was just another data silo. It was a very sophisticated silo, but we were just another silo box in the company where we had access to all these fancy reports, and we were holding it to ourselves and hoping senior management would come up and ask us for one, and we go, yes, I've got a report for you. And they would ignore it. So this comes back to what I said at the beginning, that data science and big data must empower people. When it empowers people, they're going to trust what they're doing with it, they'll be able to understand what they're doing with it, and most importantly, they'll actually use it. So we went back and we started changing how our simulation worked. We left the actual working models there because it was making good results. But we tweaked it quite a bit. We changed it into an interactive simulation. We first spent a 6-month campaign with all of our local territory offices, giving them a web application where they can go in and put in information directly into the simulation. So no longer are they doing emails back and forth between head office. We've broken down that whole silo, and now they have a direct link between them and head office with this web application. And this web application is tied to the simulation. So every time they put something in there, the simulation runs its numbers and immediately shows them what's going on. We then went around the head office and did another campaign with solely silo teams there. We got the finance teams using it. We had social media using it. We had marketing using it. So now everyone is putting all their information in. And the simulations, every time somebody goes and touches the data set, the simulation sees it, changes, and runs. So this is no longer just a static report that people are seeing. Now when an executive or just someone in distribution or in marketing is using this, they can put in their information and all their assumptions. Say, we want to release a film on Turkey in April 2015. We think the weather is going to be such and such. It will say, it's a school holiday in Turkey. According to the local office, people don't go to the cinema on school holidays. It's not going to play very well for kids. It'll give them that feedback immediately as they put it into it. Senior management sees all this information on a real-time iPad report. That problem I mentioned was 50,000 release date changes, where people can't even figure out what they need to do, which ones are going to be important. That one's solved instantly. Senior management or anyone else can log on to this simulation and it tells them what are the biggest changes that happened in the last week. Say in India, we've just lost 10% on this film. In China, a local title has just grown by 50% based on what we saw last week. Because of this, everyone can now see what their data is doing. Social media knows exactly how their part is, not exactly, but they can now see what happens when one of their social media campaigns is doing well and how it affects the film. And this worked well. This worked great. This is actually how things are done today. And we've had several major successes now that we're using this. Even a film like Les Miserables went through the process of going through the simulation, of being dated, of people using the simulation to create different scenario reports and figure out which is the best release date in specific territories. Because of this, audience are watching more of our movies. In 2013, we had a record-breaking year. I like to take credit for it all by myself, but some of the films were just really good and people would have saw them regardless. And right now we're working on a couple other projects. I mentioned at the beginning when an executive goes to a film festival and says, hey, I just saw a film I want. We should distribute it and we should acquire rights to it and distribute it internationally. One of the projects we're working on is using this into another data science process, another big data process to see if we can quantify how much a film is worth before it's even distributed. So we can know if this is a film worth distributing or not. We're doing something similar with TV scheduling with our television channels. I should mention that there's another UK television channel called Channel 4 that's light years ahead of us in doing TV scheduling, and their head of data science and data planning can tell you a lot about what goes on in television. But we're experimenting with using these same methods, just a little bit of data science, a little bit of big data, a little bit of small data, to figure out which audiences are watching the television sets where and how the competition between different channels interact. And we're also using this to look over new media rights. We all know that Netflix is very much a data-driven company, and we heard about how they produced their own television show. But where Netflix big data really shines is in their content distribution and telling you what you're going to watch. And it works the other way when they're coming to a company that's producing films and producing television, because they know how much our products are worth better than we do. And one of our projects is to build up our capabilities so that we're in negotiating contracts with Netflix and they know exactly how much the Fast and Furious franchise is worth, that we can counter and say, we know exactly how much it's worth too. We're not going any further here. Now, these projects I'm not going to go into detail about. I just wanted to give you a bit more of a flavor of what goes on at NBC Universal and leave some time for questions. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much, and I hope you've got some good questions.
Okay, thank you for your interesting talk. And then let's have some more questions, okay? You can start first. Here.
강의 참 잘 들었고요. 해외에서는 어떻게 할까? 그건 일하는 그 해외 쪽에서는 어떤 방식으로 일할지에 대한 그런 궁금증이 있었는데 되게 자세히 얘기해 주셔서 감사했고요. 저는 이제 개인적으로 머니볼에 대해서 되게 감동 있게 영화를 봤는데 이 미디어 쪽도 보면 뭐 군사작전과 같은 그런 실제 오퍼레이션이 일어나는 것 같아서 되게 인상적이었습니다. 근데 이제 데이터 분석을 해서 이런 개봉 일자를 이렇게 결정을 하신 적이 있다고 하는데 가장 성공적인 사례가 있다면 어디에 어떤 영화였는지를 좀 말씀해 줬으면 좋겠고 그게 한국이었으면 더 괜찮을 것 같습니다.
United Kingdom was our test bed for this, and Korea was one of the last territories to get on board. I'm very reluctant to give specific examples and specific numbers because these things get quite sensitive. I also can't go into specifics about how the algorithm works. But I will tell you a story about the first time people started paying attention to this. Back in 2011, maybe 2012, in the summer of, I think it was the summer of 2011, or maybe the next summer, we had several films where the simulation had said, these films aren't going to do as well as we think we should change the date. And we had a film that, when we saw it, all of our critics inside the office hated it. Everyone thought it was going to do quite badly. I'll go ahead and say the film, Bridesmaids. It was scheduled to release in the summer of that year, and my boss, the simulation was saying this film was going to do amazingly well. And my boss kept emailing the reports, because that's what we did. We sent emails back. This was before we knew we needed to empower people, before I knew we needed to empower people. And we kept sending these emails, and my boss started apologizing, saying, I have tried and tried everything on the simulation to bring this film down, and I don't know what's wrong with it. I'll talk to Matthew, and we'll sort it out. And finally, a couple months rolled by of this. I didn't fix the simulation because I didn't see any reason to. And when the release date rolled around, it did exactly as the simulation said. It opened number one. It was one of our biggest successes that we didn't see coming. And this was a great case because I was able to explain to people how the simulation came to that decision. Because what it picked up on was that the World Cup was going on at the same time. It was either the World Cup or a rugby game or something else that opened up a whole new market demographic that this film was going to play for. The other films that were opening that same weekend were all playing for the market that was going to be seeing the sports games. And once I had that success, that's when people started paying attention to what we were doing, and when we realized we needed to tweak this so that these things weren't coming out of the blue, that people saw them coming, and they saw the rationale behind them. And in hindsight, this is a very obvious thing, but same with the Obama campaign. In hindsight, it's obvious that you need to be knocking on doors of only people who are not solidly Republican. But sometimes you don't see that hindsight until you have 15 terabytes of data telling you what the obvious thing is. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe Joe. Where's the microphone? Oh, okay.
Is this working?
Yeah, I think so.
So I understand how it goes into release date. Do you guys use this as far as do they use this in the greenlighting process, or is that a separate?
The last bit I mentioned, actually the first bit I mentioned about acquiring films, that's the greenlight process. We're experimenting with different models for that.
Okay, so Any other questions?
To clarify, the green light process, for those who aren't familiar, is when somebody has seen a film and potentially wants to acquire it so that we can distribute it across all of our different channels. And when we're picking this up, this is a process we go through to make sure this is a film we should produce or that we should distribute.
All right. Okay. Can you bring the microphone? Because this is not really working.
In terms of developing markets, can you tell me which markets you're seeing as the biggest growth for film?
China, but I think you knew that. China is definitely considered a developing market in as much as it's really hard for Western films to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard for us to predict what's going to happen because there's only a few days per year they'll let Western films in. So we're often competing against ourselves, our own films, or another studio's films, and we can't use a lot of this. But China's been growing exponentially year after year, but I think that's not a very insightful answer because we all saw that one coming. Interestingly enough, a market that's really, really easy to predict is also the same market that has a ton of piracy, and that's Russia.
All right. So, no other questions? Okay. One more.
You said piracy with a smile on your face. So how do you... you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Actually, I don't know what you're saying. What's your question?
Well, piracy is an interesting issue, but I would imagine that each film is pirated at a different rate, right, based on its demo. So in the case of Russia, you can also spot the trend in piracy to understand.
Exactly. In fact, you can use Russia by tracking piracy in Russia, you can use it as a test bed to see how well that film's going to distribute in home entertainment, being iTunes or Amazon or Netflix or even DVD sales, by how many pirates are downloading it, especially the pirates in Russia. The pirates in Russia are ahead of the pirates anywhere else, so you know if the pirates in Russia are on top of it.
Okay, so maybe one last question.
Classified, sorry.
All right, so if you have no other questions, okay. Thank you very much.